lottery of those 60 students and select which, it's just random, which 50 are selected from that list of 60. There's a few instances in which we can give people preferential treatment, and those are listed in our contract, and they include things such as if a student has a sibling who currently attends our school, or if the student is a child of one of our staff members. We're able to give preferential treatment, but with those very small number of exceptions aside, it's a blind lottery process. And that, I think, is one reason why thinking in terms of phases is so important, because I can't, and this is challenging, is if somebody submits their application on January 1st, I can't guarantee them a spot. I can't say, great, we've got your application, now let's get you ready for the start of school, because I can only officially do that on March 1st when we do our blind lottery. Because if 70 students apply, I don't have the ability to take 70 fifth grade students. And so this is, I think, the point of why it's important to think in terms of phases, is the communication has to be really careful and strategic at each step. I don't want to overpromise and say, great, you've applied, come on in, let's grab you and let's go from there. But at the same time, I can't be so cold to say, oh, great, you submitted one on January 1st. You're not going to hear from me until March 1st, and maybe you'll get in and maybe you won't, because that's not a welcoming environment to students or to families. And so thinking about where each family is at in the process is really, really important for that exact reason.
Can I clarify a couple of things that I think you said and make sure that we're all on the same page? With respect to, I think you said that this was referenced, the dates and all were referenced in your contract. And I think I want to just try to clarify. And Christy, I can't see you or Amanda, but y'all help me if I'm wrong. But it's the enrollment and the recruitment process that's in the contract. Your dates are specific to your own policy and procedures. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. And I was just going to add that, I think one of the preference that I just want to add on is that we preference scholars who are considered underserved. And so those are the scholars who receive free or reduced lunch, or also have an IEP. And so part of the reason why Kevin has his date as March 1st, my date is different, but yes, it's based on your enrollment policy. But the whole idea is that some of the scholars who need us the most might not find out about us and sign up, in August or October, or be the ones who are like right there ready to go as soon as, it's time to enroll their scholars. So making sure that you put it somewhat late so that the scholars who need us the most have an opportunity, the ones who might not know about us, the ones where we might have to go knock on their doors. So it's really important to have that date to make sure that the preference is available for all scholars.
And then can you guys elaborate just a little bit on what the recruitment technically looks like? I have an idea, but again, just to make sure that everybody has a really good understanding of what that means when you say recruit. What are you actually doing out there to recruit those children? Either one of you.
Yeah, so there's a variety of things that we do, and I think Kevin's going to talk about this a little bit later. Do you want to, Kevin, do you want to?
If I jump ahead, y'all just say.
I think there's quite a few things. This is just the first of many, many great slides.
Okay.
But Kevin.
No. I don't want to steal your thunder. Y'all just say, Lisa, shut up, and we'll go on to the next slide.
Yeah, no, I think it.
Listen, Dr. K, I'm not shy about asking questions.
Okay.
If they run into something that I don't understand, I'll speak up.
Okay, perfect.
And I'll watch the chat too, in case if there are things you would rather put.
All right, great. I'm gonna be quiet.
No, you're good. I think what I'm trying to frame up here is thinking about students and families in terms of phases, which I don't think is something we always do. And I'll explain in a moment about why I think that's an important approach to take. So I explained kind of briefly what it could look like in an ideal world. Here's a more realistic approach. So in January and February, we might recruit 30 students. And so what would happen in March is we would admit those 30 students, and we would work with those 30 students to collect their documentation, while simultaneously at the same time, we are going to continue recruitment efforts. So that by the time we get to April, well, that first group, I need to keep them engaged. That second group, I need, let's say I have 10 people that were admitted from that round. And then simultaneously, I'm continuing to recruit new students until I reach my my goal or my target. So that by May, I'm keeping those first two cohorts engaged, and then working with students who are either on the wait list or had been admitted. Same thing, in June, keeping families engaged. If students back out, pulling students from the wait list. And then in July, keeping all students engaged in sort of the final push. And so the reason that I think that this matters, and this kind of goes to Dr. Lisa, what you were talking about initially, is setting really clear goals and backwards planning in advance is absolutely crucial. And I gave the example of the 5th grade class, which, as we discussed, is the youngest grade available at Midtown. But you're right, it actually gets even more complex for upper grades, because, for instance, for grade 6, I might have 70 slots. Well, if I have 50 grade 5 students, I would hope that the vast majority of those 50 will want to retain into grade 6. And so I'm both trying to recruit some new students to fill the spots, but also hopefully keeping those students. And again, the need for backwards planning is so crucial, because I need to know by March 1st, that's when I do my first drawing. I need to know by then how many new 6th grade students I can have. And in order to know that, I need to know by then how many current 5th grade students are planning to return. Again, I'm hoping it's all 50, but families might move, families might whatever. And so I need to know by then, which again speaks to the backwards planning, because in January and February, while I'm out recruiting new students, I simultaneously have to have some kind of way to check in with my current 5th grade students to ask them which ones of you all are planning to return, so that I know on March 1st how many new students I can draw from. So I think the need to set clear goals and backwards plan is crucial. I think also information management is crucial. Schools must have a designated point person, and I say must not as a legal sense, but as a recommendation. Schools should really have a designated point person to manage the recruitment and enrollment process, and they need to have a clear track list of whether they're taking the paper applications or Google spreadsheet or whatever it is. They need to have a clear system to know which students are in which bucket. And that way, again, they can know how much more recruitment needs to happen for which grades in particular. And if a student, applies initially in January, but then decides in May that they're not going to come, somebody should always have that information at the top of their tongue and be able to say, we still need this many more students for this grade and this many more students from this grade. And, maybe in the morning it was, we still need 10 more people, but then 2 of those people dropped out. So now we're back up to 12, but we got 4 new ones. And so now we only need 8 or whatever. You've got to be able to manage that information really, really closely to know what your targets are. And then lastly, messaging should be targeted specifically for the phase that each student is in. So I'll give a counterexample and then a stronger example. A counterexample would be on April 1st, if you took the email addresses of everybody you have so far, and you sent one mass email that said, hey, if you haven't submitted yet, you should. And if you recently submitted, well, then I'm pleased to announce you're in the spot. And if you've already submitted your documentation, we're glad you're here. And kind of have one mass message that goes to everybody, those tend to not be as effective or personal. And so a more effective approach would be, on April 1st, sending one email to people who have already done their documentation, a second email to people who, are just newly admitted, and a third email for people who are still in the recruitment phase and they haven't yet applied. And so having these messages targeted for the specific phase that each student is in is likely to both be a more personalized experience for families, as well as keep them engaged and keep them hooked and get the information that you need from the families. And I think the good news is these emails can all be planned in advance. And so, that's one strategy that we'll take is in November and December when, recruitment hasn't really picked up yet, we can set these templates so that when April 1st comes, we're in execution mode at that time. We're no longer planning our messages. We're no longer planning what's going to come out. We've got all the templates ready to go, and we can just push those out because managing all that information is going to be so crucial that trying to think of entire campaigns from the ground up can be quite challenging. So that's why I think it's important to think about them in phases. And now for the tips, Dr. Lisi, you were talking about this a little bit earlier. I think it's important to have a clear vision for what makes your school special. So research shows that instead of bad-mouthing existing schools, if you can instead say, here's what makes our school special, that tends to be more effective and more positive. And then I also think making sure that everybody on your staff is clear on that why and clear on the differentiating factors between you and maybe other schools and can articulate that and practice that, I think is crucial because, we are the ambassadors for our school. And when we are in the grocery store or, wherever, and someone sees your school logo on your shirt and says, oh, tell me about that school, you should be able to, be prepared to speak to, why that matters. And then I think it's finding ways to share that vision. And so, Dr. Lisa, I think this goes to the question that you were asking, and I think it really does vary from school to school. Some schools have really phenomenal social media campaigns, and that's pretty much what drives the entire, everything they do is just the online campaigns. Others are, much more community focused. They might be at all the sporting events and be at all the, big things that are going on in your community. Advertisements, maybe writing op-eds for your local paper if there's a newspaper that is very popular within your particular community, information sessions, school tours, either in person or virtually, to find ways to get that vision out as well. And then another tip is to make your application process as simple but complete as possible. So if your application is too long and you've got way too many questions on there, then it tends to be off-putting and families might not want to engage in that process. If on the other hand, you don't have enough information on that form and you later have to go back to families with another form and then back to families with another form and then back to families with another form, that can be difficult as well. And so something that we have found success in is going through every question that was on our application and really thinking, is there a purpose for this? Like, is this something that we actually need? Can we use this information later? And if not, let's cross it off. But what else we did is we thought a lot about like, what information do we not have that would be helpful for us to have? And we put all of that on one thing so that people can, we don't have to keep going back to people over and over and over again.
Kevin, if I can just jump in, I think the biggest thing too is just sharing the vision as wide as possible. It's not a school of choice if people don't know that it's a choice. And so being very clear about your messaging that we do serve scholars with special needs. And so that making sure that that's plain and present on communication, and also that we provide transportation if you do. And so making sure that's plain and present so that it's not really a school of choice if people don't have the option and have that choice there. And so spreading the message as wide as possible, and making sure that it's not just the people who have access to the typical ways of communicating the message.
Thanks, Amanda. In the enrollment stage, when a student has officially been admitted and you're working to collect their documentation, I think one tip is to keep the magic alive. And so this is, again, where it's important to talk about, all the great things that students will be doing at your school. And I point that out to say, this is the phase where it's easy to forget about that and just focus on, I need your proofs of residence, and I need your 121 form, and I need this, and I need that. And it gets really easy to get caught up in the logistics. And instead making sure to find ways to say, we're so thrilled that you've been admitted. I can't wait till your student takes our coding class, and whatever it is. And oh, by the way, please make sure to submit this documentation to us. So keeping the vision alive, setting really clear deadlines, and thinking about those really strategically. If you say, hey, by the end of the week, I need all this documentation, that might not be enough time. But if you say, hey, anytime in the next 3 months, please bring us that documentation, it's easy to kind of forget about those kind of things and put it off for too long. And so finding an appropriate deadline that is not too soon or too late, and setting those really clear deadlines so families know when you need their documentation, I think is important. Clear tracking, at least in our case, I don't know if this is the case for everybody, but families will often come in with some of their documentation, but not necessarily all their documentation all at one time, like we might hope that they would. And so finding a really clear way to know which families have submitted which documents and which families still have which documents outstanding can be helpful. And then finally, compassionate check-ins. So when families do not submit required documentation, providing gentle reminders to them and finding out if there's any obstacles that you can help them overcome to make sure that you're getting all the information you need from them. And finally, in the engagement stage, so once they've submitted all of the documentation and they're just waiting for the school year to start, I think keep engaging. It can be easy to say, okay, phew, we've got all of Amanda's paperwork, so I don't need to worry about Amanda. But of course, if they're not hearing from you in a while or things like that, they might not feel welcome. They might begin looking for other options or reconsidering their choice. And so making sure to keep families engaged is important. And then also not only keeping the communication going, but keeping it both ways. So, if I have a parent and I've collected all their documentation, I think the worst thing we can do is not communicate with them at all. The second worst thing we can do is we can send them things like, oh, read this article, or we were in the news or whatever, but not ever hearing from them. So I think in an ideal world, you would keep the communication going and also not only sharing resources from your school, but also hearing from families and students about what's going on in their lives as well, and what they're excited about. And lastly, of course, begin setting the stage. So transitioning to a new school can be really hard for both students and families alike. And we can use the engagement stage to help ease that transition. So whether it's the social transition, like maybe we can connect a current student with an incoming student and help provide those mentorship opportunities, or whether it's academic things, here are the top 5 things you can do to prepare yourself for a rigorous education at Midtown or whatever. Helping students with those transitions as well. So that is a quick overview of our best practices for recruitment and enrollment and monitoring the process ongoing.
Kevin, how many, or do you have the classes that you've recruited and the classes that are enrolled? Do you do anything to try to facilitate conversation among those new enrollees? Rather than somebody that's already been at the school, do you do anything to put those 50 people in touch with one another?
Yeah, we've begun that process. I will admit we probably haven't done as much as we could, and I think I would like to do more and more. Perhaps even create formal mentorship processes where we are specifically linking each incoming student with a new student. We haven't done that quite yet, but we do a new student orientation, and we do have a series of programs that are specifically designed for new students and new families. So we've dipped our toe in that area, and certainly I'm looking forward to doing more and more of that.
Amanda, did you have something else? Did you have anything else to add? Okay.
Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Yeah. DRG, anybody that has a question?
No questions, but thank you, Kevin and Amanda. I made some great points.
I just have one question in particular, just about monitoring the student enrollment throughout the year. So keeping your finger on the pulse of your enrollment so that you don't run into issues where you have too many children leaving or or an area where you're not meeting the requirements from the framework. Talk to us a little bit about how you track that. I know you get your information from MSIS, and I know you get all that information and you do attendance daily and all of that. But beyond just that information, are there other things you are doing?
Yeah, I mean, we're constantly watching the enrollment to ensure that we stay at or close to our target, our budget target. And so I think that's definitely important. We believe in backfilling, and we'll backfill at any point throughout the year. We try to be mindful of breaks. We probably won't backfill at the beginning of December, but right after Christmas break, it's a great time to fill any missing any seats of folks who have moved. It's not a time, I will say, you mentioned to meet the requirements of the framework. You can't meet the requirements of the framework during the year. Like, that's a recruitment piece. And so that's what I was saying. Like, you have to, make sure that your message is spread wide and clear, and that you, communicate that you have special education services. But that's not, I mean, once your wait list is there and as people come, you can't meet that requirement through enrollment.
I didn't mean meeting it from that point in time or for that point in time. I just meant that as you're going throughout the year, to make sure that you're on target once we do the annual performance report and we gather all that data, then during the site visit or school visit, school tour or whatever, whether it's a desk audit or whatever, and we're looking at the numbers, that you guys are able to meet those targeted numbers that are in your not only in your enrollment projections,
right,
but by statute or in terms of what it's special ed or EL kids or whatever. So
right. I mean, it's hard to. So yes, I think, and that's why I kind of emphasize that in the recruitment piece, because you don't know, like, you can't ask those questions when you're enrolling those kids, and so it's typically a reflection of recruitment, not the enrollment process.
And on your recruitment forms that you guys have, I know you have to have a little indicator for whether or not they receive special ed services right now, currently, or anything like that, or do you not on your enrollment? So
on enrollment forms, yes. Enrollment forms, yes.
Okay.
Not applications.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Lisa, and I think that's changed a little bit since everything started, because when we first started, there was so much discussion and making sure that that we were doing blind recruitment and enrollment so that you wouldn't see that students had IEPs and choose one over another.
Right.
And so there was some discussion about how do you truly have this blind enrollment process yet still recruit and enroll X number of students with IEPs.
Right.
So, and I know that when we first started, we didn't ask that question. And I really don't know that Republic did either. But then about the year 3, there was some conversation about you have to know so you can make sure that you're enrolling, X number of students. Now, we never had any issues. We've had an issue one year out of the 5 years with students with IEPs. But you just have to be real careful, because if you ask that question initially, if you have a student in a wheelchair, for instance, and that, you somewhat open the door for a school to maybe choose another student or, whatever. So we really try to be careful.
Christy, we don't ask the question at the application stage. So we leave that, we don't ask any of that information. You do leave yourself open to exactly what you said. And so with Yeah, so we don't ask that. And so if we have to do a lottery, we ask once we hit the deadline. And so we don't send up our numbers. We don't ask MSI or MDE to provide us that information until after we've identified that we need a lottery. I just don't think it's, I don't know. You shouldn't ask at the beginning. And that's just my opinion. And so I think in order to make sure that you are being, making sure it's a blind lottery. I don't know.
And do you, and this is interesting because it's something that Marion actually started to where we were filling out a form. Parents were giving their permission to get this information from MDE, but then we got into a timing conflict, so ideally, Amanda, I agree, at March 1, you take all the students, and then after that point, if you see you have to have a lottery, then you find out which students actually have the IEPs. But the question is the time frame of getting that information back, what that looks like. So I don't know if you all have run into that, or
we've had
fortunate that we haven't necessarily had.
Amanda is the only school that, since I've been here a year and a half, Amanda's the only school that I've ever received any request for that information from MDE or those forms. Amanda, that I remember last year, a year ago when I first got here in February, you were asking, about the forms and what the parents had to fill out for a request for MDE to give that permission. And I was completely lost in Dropbox trying to find the forms because it must have been something that Marion had developed prior to her leaving. So, but you have been, since I've been here, the only school that's requested that.
Potentially maybe the only school going through the authorizer. I don't know if Christy, if you guys send it directly to MDE.
We try to go through the authorizer for, anything that we need. We actually have not, run into needing the lottery the last couple of years. So, we have X number come in to March, and then, we're able to fill. So I know the first year we had the lottery, and we actually had parents show up for the lottery and all that. We haven't the last couple of years.
Yep.
And that's what I was wondering, if maybe we haven't had that from Republic or anybody else. I know, DRG, you did a lottery, right?
We haven't done a lottery.
You didn't have to do one?
No, we didn't have to do one.
Amanda, you must be the only one that's had to do.
Yeah, our upper grades, we have 40 kids on the wait list for 4th grade. We have to do a lottery at our older grades.
Okay, anybody else have any other questions about the presentation? Y'all did a great job. Very good.
So Kevin, even as he was caring for a newborn baby, he was putting together a student recruitment PowerPoint.
Did you have a baby already?
We did, yes. 1 week today.
Oh my goodness, a boy, girl?
A little girl.
A little girl. Oh, that's exciting. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes, congratulations, Kevin.
Thank you very much.
No idea. That is exciting. Okay, well, great job, y'all. And especially Kevin, since you probably hadn't had much sleep. Excellent work on that. I didn't see any misspelled words or anything like that. Great. So it was very, very well done. Okay, so I believe then for next steps, what Vanda had said is just a reminder, and Amanda, not Vanda, said you had already uploaded that document into the Google Share. So that's great. We appreciate that. And then the next meeting is charge C and D. And let me see who has that. I think DRG and Christy. So that would be for recommendations on contractual and statutory obligations, and then, if appropriate, any recommendations to the changes for the performance framework. Is that what y'all have?
Okay. You do. And Kevin and Amanda, that's quite the act to follow. So
that's what I was thinking.
And Kevin's usually my graphics person, so
Um,
You might have some help there, Christy, since you're, kind of close to each other and in the same building sometimes. So maybe he would be kind enough to help you a little.
he's done the newborn thing before. He's got time to help you.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, well, that is much appreciated, y'all. I do hope that by the end of this task force, that we are really able to iron out any of this real serious challenges that we have. And if we can come to some agreement on what needs to be brought forth, if anything, to the legislature in terms of changes. I say this all the time, and I know Avery and Mr. Billingsley will agree with me, that when you, and y'all know this, when you open up a code at the legislative level, anything can happen. And so it's got to be whatever we do take that we, and y'all know the dynamics right now out there and the anti-charter speak that's all over at a national level. So I think we just need to be conscious of that as we consider what we can live with and how we can manage what we already have and what we really, really might want to take to the legislature for consideration. So just remembering that and keeping that in the forefront, I think is important. Mr. Billingsley, Avery, any comment?
No, thank you. I mean, I really appreciate the work that you all did. This is impressive, and I think we're in good hands. I'm glad that you guys are able to put all this stuff together.
Me too. I love that presentation, and I'm really enjoying learning along with everyone. I'm usually just looking at codes and regulations, so it's nice to see the practical aspects of how y'all are doing charter schools in Mississippi. So thank you for letting me be a part of this.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. We appreciate it. All right. Well, if no one has any other questions or comments, then we will reconvene on August the 11th. And Christy and D. Archie will look forward to a presentation from y'all with maybe some recommendations as well. So
Be ready.
all right, that sounds good. Okay, y'all have a good afternoon, a good evening, and let us know if we can do anything to help you.